Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, we're going to be testing Assassin's Creed Unity in its minimum and recommended system requirements. Let's take a look at them right now. On the minimum, it asks for an Intel Core i5-2500K at 3.3 GHz. That means that it's at stock speeds. That's exactly what we're running here. I can't even overclock with this motherboard. 6 GB of RAM. We're using a 4 GB DIMM as well as a 2 GB DIMM. So 6 GB in total. It's DDR3 1333 MHz, and on the graphics card it asks for a GTX 680, which I recently got here in the channel, and that's what we will be using right here. It's a 2 GB variant, and it also asks for a 2 GB GPU right here. On the recommended side of things, it asks for an Intel Core i7-3770. I got the 3770K, which is exactly the same CPU if you don't overclock it. And of course, we will leave that at stock speeds. On the memory, it asks for 8 GB of RAM. We're running that in dual channel. This time, it's 1600 MHz, DDR3 as well. And finally, for the graphics card, it asks for the Nvidia GeForce GTX 780. This is a 3 GB GPU that I have right here. It's the Asus DirectCU 2 version, just like the 680, and interestingly, compared to the GTX 680, the cooler is much smaller, although the 780 consumes 250 watts and the 680 consumes 195 watts. That's interesting, you know. Let's play with the minimum requirements first, shall we? Alright, we're in the desktop now. You can see all of the specs of the minimum requirements PC right here, with 6 GB of RAM as well. This game released in 2014, and I think for minimum requirements we should probably aim for like 720p low settings, but I'm gonna start at 1080p first, okay? And using the low settings preset, right? Pretty much everything is set to the minimum. Not a ton of settings. Interesting. Okay, here we are. Let's start counting our FPS. It's not too bad actually. 50 frames per second. On minimum requirements, not terrible, right? And the CPU is at 100% usage at the moment. GPU usage is also up there, so I think this is a very balanced build to play this game with, especially at 1080p low settings. But yeah, this is quite smooth of an experience, especially compared to the recent titles of today, you know? 2023 games all stutter, like there's one or two exceptions, but it's terrible this year. You know, optimization is terrible, basically. Over here, CPU usage went down by a little bit. We're seeing a bit more vegetation, and the FPS are dropping slightly. It's getting more GPU bound, I guess. But yeah, this game was like a really intensive title back in the days to run, and when it came out it was full of bugs. I remember it was super heavy on any GPU out there, especially on max settings. Even the Titan struggled, which was the best GPU that you could buy back in 2014. Oh, maybe not, maybe it was like the GTX 900 series already, but I remember seeing really high-end GPUs struggling a lot in Assassin's Creed Unity. And it shows, you know, this is low settings at 1080p and it's looking pretty damn good. Aside from like the textures, everything else, like the reflections, the puddles of water here, the lighting, the shadows, even on low settings, it looks pretty great. And of course, not to mention the entire crowds that we see here. This is absolutely insane, guys, and it's a 2014 title. I also remember seeing this on the PS4 and it was dropping into like the 20s, low 20s at times on that console in the middle of the crowd. So it was extremely intensive for the CPU to handle, and of course the PS4 CPU is pretty bad, oh my god. So it struggled a lot in this game. But yeah, turns out the minimum requirements are pretty good, actually. I thought maybe something like a GTX 660 would be more adequate for this game at minimum requirements, because, you know, that's a mid-range Kepler GPU. This was a high-end Kepler GPU, the 680, and it also asked for another high-end Kepler GPU, the 780, for recommended requirements. I'm not too sure about the performance delta between the 680 and 780, but Both were high-end GPUs, same architecture and so on. Okay, since the experience was actually really decent here, I'm not gonna test 720p. I'm gonna go ahead and increase the graphics settings to medium. All right? Let's see what the minimum requirements can do on medium settings. I also think we need to restart, otherwise it won't apply the textures. All right, we're back here with the medium settings, and things are still looking pretty nice in terms of FPS. You know, it's well above 30 right now. The textures look way better than on low settings. These are actually quite decent textures, and it's not like stuttery or anything because we're running out of VRAM. Like, this is still a decent experience. I think I would still lock it to like 30 frames per second for that console-like experience, consistent one, always at 30. That would get rid of the little frame time inconsistencies that happen every once in a while, the little stutters like that one, for example. Yeah, look at how gorgeous this game looks at medium settings. I mean, even on low settings, it looked better than, for example, Last of Us Part 1 on low. Right? Let's just go up there. Once again, see the city from above. I think it doesn't really affect the FPS by much, so we should be absolutely fine. Should we go on top of that one over there? Yes, we should. I really like the bluish tones in Assassin's Creed Unity, by the way. I think it complements the game really well. Yeah, this is good. I really expected it to be terrible, once again, because these are minimum requirements, but yet here we are, playing at 40 FPS average at 1080p medium. Ooh, dropping quite a bit now. Probably because of the leaves on those trees, yeah. But not dropping from 30. So again, locking it to 30 FPS would make it super consistent. 30 all of the time. No. You go up there, buddy. You go up there. There we go. Good stuff, good stuff. Almost there, almost there. Ooh, I'm feeling a bit of stuttering here while looking up for some reason. That's pretty weird. Okay. Again, locking the FPS will get rid of it, but yeah, quite interesting. Nice, finally we're here. Look at this. It's not dropping yet. Again, this just proves that the minimum requirements are a bit wrong in this one. It should have asked for something like a 660, in my opinion. With that said, it's time for the recommended requirements. Let's see how capable that PC is. And here we go. Everything is now installed. The CPU is at stock speed. It boosts up to 3.9 gigahertz, and we got the 8 gigabytes right there. Alright guys, this is a much smoother experience. Look at those FPS and look at that frame time graph. The 8 threads on the i7 compared to the 4 threads on the i5 are making a huge difference in this very CPU-intensive title for its age. Now, let's go over the settings. I am using exactly the same preset here. So we're at 1080p using the medium settings here. And compared to the GTX 680 from the previous generation, the 780 over here is doing a much better job. Still on the same architecture, guys, but they massively improved like CUDA core count and other specs within the GPU, of course. So yeah, it's able to achieve 60-ish frames per second at 1080p medium settings, which is a really, really nice experience here in this one, guys. I'm sorry for the screen tearing, by the way. That's a bit terrible, but it's just because of the capture card. Oh, look at the lighting here on medium settings. The textures look great as well. Everything looks really, really nice, up to 70 FPS at times. CPU usage is quite high. Oh my god, that was a bit too much for my heart. Let's go, buddy. Let's go. Okay, I want to go down there. There we go. Good stuff. Good stuff. This is more intensive within the crowds, you know? Yeah, definitely. 50s. Yeah, it's definitely not bad, but it's probably not the experience that you wanted if you had a GTX 780, which was a high-end GPU back in 2014 when this game came out. Here we go, high settings at 1080p, and okay, so it's slightly more intensive, I think. Getting mid-50s down here. It can probably still touch 60 FPS at times, but yeah, you're gonna see mostly 50s, I believe, depending on where you are, though. Yeah, it's still getting 60s around here, though. That's interesting. Like, what? I really thought it was going to be much more intensive on high settings than medium, although it looks very similar, but I can still tell a bit of a difference, especially running through crowds, that the pop-in, like loading of the clothes of the people, is a little bit faster, and it's not as noticeable, although it's still pretty damn noticeable. Oh, what are you doing? Oh boy, that's a fast boy right there. Did you see him? Oh, what the hell is he doing? Why are you running like this, my friend? Wait, let's follow him around. What the hell is happening to you, buddy? He's getting exactly the same FPS as medium settings. Like, what the hell is happening here? Weird. That's really weird. And where are you going? I don't know. Let's forget about him. Anyway, well, since this is so easy to run, apparently... Let's bump it up to very high this time around, and I'll need to restart once again. Now it's way more beautiful. Like that lighting and the shadows and the people are way more detailed right now. Ambient occlusion looks better as well, in my opinion, but it is way more intensive this time around. We lose about like 10 frames per second compared to high settings on very high. Although it's still going to be very playable, and those frame times are way smoother than the minimum requirements were. So this is still pretty nice. You know, it's very playable on very high settings on the GTX 780. It looks really amazing, honestly. Like, once again, it is a 9-year-old title and it's looking fantastic. If you haven't played this game, I say give it a shot and just take a look at the graphics at like ultra high settings, for example, on a modern system. It should look absolutely fantastic and play really well at the same time, and you're gonna experience something that people back when this game released definitely could not experience because the technology was not there, you know, for high refresh rates at 1080p. Wow, what a buggy animation though. And interestingly, I don't feel that low FPS animation anymore here while climbing this, like we saw with the minimum requirements. Maybe it was just a CPU issue once again. Look at this now. 50s on top of the world, very nice. Let's synchronize and then let's try out the ultra high settings. Can't wait for that though. That should be way more intensive, dude. Oh boy, even in the menu it's getting 33 FPS, guys. This is not a good sign. But here we go, 1080p, ultra high settings now. Oh boy. And okay, here it drops even further. All right, it drops into the 20s at times. Although now that everything loaded, it's getting slightly higher than 30 FPS actually. But I don't think it's gonna stay at 30 plus all of the time at this point. Especially if you go into like a vegetation area, for example, it's definitely gonna drop your frames. Okay, well, it's not good anymore. You'd need something like a GTX 780 Ti to be able to play at ultra high settings, always above 30. However, that frame time graph is still pretty good, you know? It's really flat. What is happening here? What are you doing? Hello? I don't know what you're saying. I'm sorry, lady. Okay, we're seeing a bit more vegetation here. Some grass as well. Hello. How are you going? Oh boy, yeah, 29, 28, just as expected. It's dropping slightly, but not by too much. So since this released in 2014, I think the 900 series were already out. I believe so, right? Like the GTX 970 was probably brand new when this released, because I think that's September of 2014 and this released in November of 2014. And the 970 is quite a bit faster than GTX 780, so that GPU could probably do ultra high settings just fine above 30 FPS all of the time. Still, it's like seeing a 4070 drop from 30 FPS in a recent title at like 1440p these days. The 970 was a beast when it came out, and it still struggled in Assassin's Creed Unity, at least going by the performance that the 780 is giving us right now. But yeah, more often than not, it's actually at 30 plus, guys. Look at the insides, by the way, the interiors. They still look really good, right? Of course, those reflections are a bit bad by today's standards, especially with all of the ray tracing happening in today's games, but still not bad at all. And now the textures look really detailed. It's maxing out our 3 gigabytes of VRAM on the 780 as well. Yep, let's just take a look right here. Dropping into the lower 30s, looking at the trees. Not bad though. And finally, on top of this, it drops into the mid-30s once again. Nothing that we haven't seen yet. So it only drops into the 20s if you come across some vegetation, some parks, for example. Everywhere else, it's gonna stay above 30, just by a little bit, but it's still above 30. So overall, the experience is actually nice and playable. So decent for recommended requirements for sure. That's been it for this one, my friends. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll be back very soon with another one. Catch you guys then. Love you all. Bye-bye.